जलधितरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगल दायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे.
Please remain standing for the ICAI motto.
सुप्तेषु जागृति य एष सुप्तेषु जागृति कामं 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 कामुषो पुरुषो निर्विमानः निर्विमानः तदेव शुक्रं तदेव शुक्रब्रह्मा तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते अस्मिन् लोकः अस्मिन् लोकः शतः सर्वे तनूनां सर्वे कश्चन कश्चन एतद्वैता 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 एतद्वैता.
I would request the dignitaries on the dais to please proceed for the lamp lighting ceremony. Small story of my own. Do you guys remember when McDonald's had first come to India? I'm sure the younger audience may not, but the older one might. Right? In 2003, I remember my father was sitting right there, had taken me to McDonald's. There was a 3-hour line to just get into the outlet, which is not seen now, but there was then. You know what strategy McDonald's had taken to come into India? Their main strategy was to get the 20 rupee burger, Mekalu Tikki. It was an entry into the so-called price-sensitive Indian market in those days. Fast forward a few years, we came up with the Tata Nano, the 1 lakh car, the supposed revolution in the motors industry. But it failed. Why did it fail in the so-called price-sensitive Indian market? Because the market had evolved. We are no longer considered as only a price-sensitive economy. We are now a value-sensitive economy. Brands like Hush Puppies are selling, the premium brand Hush Puppy is selling higher or growing at a higher rate than its original brand Bata. SUVs are being sold more than small segment cars. Why is that happening? Because the rise of India's affluent. A very recent paper by Goldman Sachs had talked about how India's economy is growing, and along with it is growing as the India's affluent. So of course, we have an expert speaker who will be speaking on it, and I will not take a lot of your time. But before that, I'd like to reiterate a proclamation by the Prime Minister of India to set the tone of the afternoon. In the life of any nation, history provides a time period when the nation can make exponential strides in its development journey. For India, the Amrutkal is ongoing. When this is the time in our history when the country takes a quantum leap. To guide us through this quantum leap, we have our wonderful speakers today. But before we get to listen to them, I would like to call upon the Thane branch chairman to share the opening remarks for this session. Mangesh, can you please come on the dais? Can we have a huge round of applause for the chairman of Thane branch, Mangesh Ganekar.
Thank you, Suyo. Good afternoon, everyone. I, CA Mangesh Ganekar, on behalf of Thane branch of WIRC of ICAI, would like to welcome you all to this unique and thought-provoking lecture on India on the threshold of Amrutkal, a way to $5 trillion economy. We at Thane ICAI are very proud to be amongst the organizing team, along with Srujan Sampada, for this enlightening lecture. We are really fortunate to have with us a visionary economist and historian, Dr. Sanjeev Sanyal. In fact, he is one of the key contributors to the success story of the Indian economy. The person supporting this event wholeheartedly is none other than Dr. Vinay Sahasrabudhe sir. Thane and Dr. Vinay are just indispensable. Friends, our beloved country has attained its Amrut Mahotsav now, which means 75 years. And this age is supposed to be the age full of experience and enjoying its wisdom and wealth all through toils and hardships. We are the luckiest generation, in fact, in this country to reap the rewards of freedom as well as economic developments. Especially in the last 10 years, India has marched ahead and crossed respected milestones under the able leadership. But friends, such economic development was not easy. Economic development at large is a sum total effect of many things: education and entrepreneurship, passion and perseverance, patience, leadership and loyalty, governance, and many adjectives. I am proud to be a chartered accountant, a profession which has always witnessed India's story since its 1950, but also actively participated in the process to make it happen. Our alma mater, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, is also celebrating its Amrut Mahotsav. And now, CAs have to shoulder great responsibility in building our nation to reach that 5 trillion mark. The role of a CA in the economy is that of a support system. We are those sappers in the army. For the business, we are all advisors and auditors. For the government, we are instruments of governance and compliance. For the disputers, we are the arbitrators. For investors, we are wealth creators. And for aggrieved people, we are all legal fighters. Such is the versatility of a chartered accountant. Lastly, I would like to conclude that economics was defined by Lionel Robbins, that it is a science which studies human behavior as a relationship between ends and scarce means which have alternative uses. Accountants are persons who compare and measure the progress and gaps between ends and means and report it independently. I wish you all gain knowledge about Indian economy and feel proud today and be encouraged to give our best. Thank you.
Thank you, Mangesh. I too am a proud chartered accountant. I would like to call upon the dais now CA Mangesh Ginare, the Central Council member of ICAI and ex-officio Thane branch member. Mangesh sir, please, can we have a huge round of applause for CA Mangesh sir?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Respected dignitaries on the dais, Dr. Sanjeev Sanyal ji, who has been a chief guest, or you can say a chief speaker here today, and we are all eager to listen to him. With him, our own Dr. Vinay Sahasrabudhe, former Rajya Sabha MP, and our Thanites, and we are proud that our Thanites have grown to such a great height. Chairman of Thane branch of ICAI, C. Mangesh Ganekar, former chairman of Thane branch, Sanjeev Sanyal sir, who has been another coordinator and organizer for this program, respected dignitaries of the dais, and my dear friends. It's indeed a privilege to be a part of this session on Indian economy, and that too, to listen to the speech by Dr. Sanjeev Sanyal. Briefly, since the organizing team, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, Thane branch, I would like to brief sir regarding the institute. The institute is founded on 1st July 1949, and as Mangesh said just now, we are also celebrating 75th year of our existence. In fact, as it is fondly said, that before the Constitution of India came into existence, the lawmakers thought it fit to form this pioneer institution in India. It is said, and I think Mangesh has also reiterated, that it is primarily started with an auditing and accounting aspects in the mind. But over the period of years, it has spread in the different areas of the human life, I can say. And it has grown in numbers also. Today we are 4 lakhs members in country and 9 lakhs students throughout the country. The recent examination which we are going to hold in May, the statistics say that 4 lakh students are going to appear throughout the country in this examination. In Thane, sir, we have Thane branch. We have such 175 branches throughout the country, and Thane branch is one such large branch, which has more than 4,000 members and around 15,000 students. We have been organizing such programs on different fields, not only for our fraternity but society at large, so that the members and society at large will get enlightened. And today, this is such program which is being organized. ICAI also conducts not only the programs for members or activities for members, but we have been doing, in fact, we have a committee, full-fledged committee for MSME and startup. Last year, we had organized the MSME Yatra in 75 cities of the country, and spread the entire message of SMEs and MSMEs throughout the country. We also have different kind of activities run for corporate social responsibilities, or you can say social responsibilities. In fact, Institute is the first such institute which has formed SRO called Institute of Social Auditors, and SEBI has been kind enough to give us authority to have that Social Auditors Institute in our fold. So like that, Institute is organizing different activities. I can say that going forward, then the only accounting and auditing field. As it is fondly said, and Mangesh also mentioned, that chartered accountants are no longer only the auditors or accountants, but they are total business solution providers. And now we are in fact marching a step ahead and going to the areas of even the social aspects of the economy. And that way, we are also part and parcel of the economic development of the country. In fact, the chartered accountants, I can say that the GST, we can take an example of GST implementation. We have been always hand in hand with the government of India or state governments in implementing their different policies. So I think this is one of the such sessions which will definitely have a thought-provoking exercise amongst the members and society at large. And thank you very much, sir, for being here in Thane for this. I must thank my friend Sujay Patki also for taking efforts and bringing Sanjeev ji here in Thane. Thank you, Vinay ji, for gracing this occasion. Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Mangesh sir. Now I would like to request CA Mangesh Ghanekar, the branch chairman, to welcome our guest of honor, Dr. Vinay Sahasrabudhe, with the bouquet of flowers and the memento. CA Sanjeev Brahme to felicitate him with a shawl and a Shrifal. I would request CA Mangesh Ghanekar to welcome our chief guest today, Dr. Sanjeev Sanyal, with a bouquet of flowers and a memento. I would also request CA Mangesh Ghanekar to felicitate him with a shawl and a Shrifal. Thank you, everyone. I would like to now call upon the dais, the first speaker of today, Dr. Vinay Sahasrabudhe. Vinay ji is a resident of our very own Thane city. He has been the MP of Rajya Sabha from 2016 to 2022. He is the President of Indian Council for Cultural Relations, Vice Chairman of Rambhav Margi Prabodhini, and sir, I would like to tell you that your speech on the role of CAs in nation building was really inspirational last time. We look forward for more. Thank you, sir.
Institute of Chartered Accountants of Indiaच्या वतीने आज या ठिकाणी योजलेल्या कार्यक्रमातले आपले मुख्य वक्ते आणि देशातले एक अतिशय नामवंत अर्थतज्ञ डॉक्टर संजीव सन्याल, व्यासपीठावर उपस्थित ठाण्याच्या चार्टर्ड अकाउंटंट्सचे भीष्म पितामह असे संजीव ब्रह्मेजी, आमचे मित्र मंगेश केंद्रेजी आणि मंगेश आठवलेजी, मंगेश घाणेकरजी आणि समोर उपस्थित असलेले अनेक मान्यवर, विद्यार्थी, चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट्स, बंधु और भगिनी। संजीव जी, मैंने जानबूझकर मराठी में प्रारंभ किया है क्योंकि मैं जानता हूं कि अगर ये कार्यक्रम कोलकाता में होता तो बांग्ला में ही शुरू होता, तो मुझे लगा कि यहाँ पर भी पहले हम मराठी से प्रारंभ करते हैं, बाद में अन्य भाषाओं की तरफ भी बढ़ते हैं। किसी ने एक चर्चा का किस्सा मुझे बताया था। Somebody was asking what is the secret of the most dynamic economy of India, and somebody said that we have very dynamic advisors to the prime ministers, and one of them, the evergreen advisor of the prime minister, is our very own Dr. Sanjeev Sanyal. And with Dr. Sanyal, I must say that there is a very unique blend of a historian and an economist, a very rare thing perhaps. In a way I can say that he has his own views about the history of our economy, and therefore his passion to fix our national economy must have been a great source of motivation for him, as I have been seeing him working as the member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Another important aspect of Dr. Sanyal's personality is that he is a very grounded person. He doesn't roam around with that aura of being a member of the Advisory Council of a person no less than the Prime Minister of India. He interacts very easily, very freely, very candidly, and also he is known for his very thoughtful writings as well, not just as a on the subjects like history and economy, but on other subjects as well, and therefore he is very much a social thinker as well, which is again something very unique about Dr. Sanyal. Third important thing is that, and you will realize this when you listen to his presentation, that he takes economics beyond statistics, something very important for commoners, if not for the chartered accountants. But commoners understand economy not just simply by statistics, but by gathering some insights out of those statistical details, and that he has been very wonderfully doing all along. Friends, I must congratulate and thank the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and its Thane chapter for having organized this kind of a lecture and having invited me as well, because I have always regarded ICAI as one of the very well-structured institution which has been playing a key role in Indian economy all through the decades. And of late, if I may remark in that fashion, that ICAI is also becoming more and more people-oriented. I don't know decades before whether there was a Thane branch or not. Generally, Thane used to be considered just as a city along with Mumbai, But Thane has its own personality, its own character, its own identity, and therefore the ICAI deciding to have a Thane chapter is a wonderful thing, great thing. I must congratulate the ICAI office bearers in Thane as well. We are, as the title suggests, on the threshold of Amrutkal, and this Amrutkal is not simply for the government to do something, it is also for the citizenry to contribute in the advancement of Indian economy. And in that context, as what we have been saying, that the economic literacy, especially in the context of finances, personal finance and other things as well, have been on the upswing all through the last maybe 10 years or so. Because when the economy is in the pink, when the economy is booming, naturally people also are very enthusiastic, whether it is investment and other things as well. But then, along with enhanced finance literacy, there is also a kind of enhanced finance or economic adventurism. And to that extent, I believe we need to have further gathering of insights every now and then. And in that context, I believe this kind of a lecture is very, very important. I am happy Dr. Sanyal, on our request, made it over here. And without taking much of your time and remaining in between you and Dr. Sanyal, I take your leave. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sahasrabudhe. It is always an honor to listen to your guidance. The next introduction that I'm about to make is one of the most promising introductions that I've made in my life. So, without further ado, Dr. Sanjeev Sanyal, member of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, Principal Economic Advisor to the Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance from 2017 to 2022. By profession, he's an economist, a historian and a writer. His phenomenal academic background makes him a Rhodes Scholar from the Oxford University, Bachelor in Economics from the very famous Sri Ram College of Commerce in New Delhi, and he's also an alumnus of St. Xavier's, Kolkata. Let's hear what we are waiting for. Dr. Sanjeev Sanyal, can you please grace us with your...
Good afternoon, friends. Vinay ji, Sanjeev ji, the two Mangesh jis. Friends, thank you very much for inviting me to come here and speak to you today. It's indeed a pleasure to be back here, I think about after 2 years or so. And yes, and when I was here 2 years ago, we were just about coming out of COVID. So the mood then was much more uncertain and felt much more unsettled than it does today. But do remember that, we did come out of this from very difficult times. But of course, as we stand today, the Indian economy, and many of you know this already, but I'll state it again, is by some margin the strongest, fastest growing economy in the world. And I'm including here small economy. Usually there is some caveat is given, major economy or something. We are by some margin the fastest growing economy in the world, growing at about 8% in this financial year that is just about to end. And with the momentum going into next year of doing somewhere in the range of 7%. So this is quite incredible because we are doing this with almost no help from the rest of the world. Many of our major export markets, Japan, Germany, UK and so on, are in actual recession. And although America's economy is still growing, it is growing under circumstances that feel that it's quite wobbly. So under those circumstances, to be generating an 8% GDP growth rate, which by the way is in excess not just of what IMF, World Bank and other commentators were saying, but is in fact also in excess of what the government itself expected. Now, this pace, even if it now comes off, I don't think we will be, I personally don't think we'll do an 8% again the next coming financial year. But even if we slow down a little bit, say to 7% or thereabouts, keeping this pace going, we will, in the next 24 months or so, go past first Japan and then Germany, become the third largest economy in the world. So in the year 24-25, our economy will be about $4.11 trillion. Japan's economy is about $4.3 trillion, and it is not growing, and the yen is, if anything, weakening. Then Germany's economy is about at $4.6 trillion. Its economy too is not growing. So in a relative sense, they're making it easy for us. But we, in US dollar terms, nominal, we are growing at about 10% at least. So you compound, you're all experts in maths. So you know how fast we will get there. So when I say in 24 months time we are going past this is the maths we are talking about. It doesn't require too much imagination to see that we will go past them. Of course, even at the other side of this, when we will be the world's third largest economy in US dollar terms. By the way, in purchasing power terms, we are already the third largest economy in the world. So, but when we are in US dollar terms, of course, we will still be a very poor country. We are the third largest economy, but the largest population. With a large denominator, when you divide one by the other, our per capita income will still be low. But still, this will be huge progress. For one thing, with a larger numerator, the per capita number will be much better than today. But there are some advantages to simply being big. It creates an internal market. The first time, now that we have a GST, since having GST, we have created an internal market. People forget that GST in some ways was a free trade agreement India signed with itself. So having an internal market, which is the third largest in the world, simply having bulk has advantages in terms of the trade deals we sign, the geopolitical clout we have. So even though per capita income will be lower, when we transition in the next 2-3 years to becoming the world's third largest economy, there will be a palpable change in our place in the world. But this has to be maintained for another quarter of a century. China, our gap with China today is essentially the result of compounding. Again, all of you are into understanding what compounding means. And this is an important thing to understand, because very often people forget that this is not about getting a little bit faster growth in any one year. It's okay to have a little bit slower here, a bit more here, but it's about keeping that compounding process going. Now, this is not a trivial point, which brings me to the very first principle that when we run this economy, that we stand by, which is, for whatever it's worth, we are macroeconomic conservatives. And you will remember that even in the height of COVID, we are one country that ignored global experts and were quite conservative in the way we use fiscal and monetary resources. You will all remember also, I was personally attacked by many of these global experts for not caring for the poor and other such things. Now, 4 years later, people may understand what we were trying to do. Because you see, macroeconomic stability is very, very important if we want to maintain this compounding process through. 1 percentage point, if instead of growing at 8% this year, we had grown at 7%, the heavens would not have fallen. But if in order to force it to grow a little bit faster, we had allowed our inflation to pop up, our current account to blow up, our banking system to go awry, then let me tell you, that's a bad thing. And to understand this, look at what happened to Southeast Asia. just like we are in the position today of getting into this group of high growth, they too, if you go back to the 90s, they too on this high growth trajectory, and for a few years, just like we talk of China today, they looked that they were going to succeed. And then the Asian crisis happened, and many of these countries never got back onto the growth path. Indonesia, Thailand, and so on. So it is very important that we never fall off this track. Even if it means in any particular year we have to maintain some control. This is particularly true for our financial system. The financial system is a very special sector. It is the circulatory system of the economy. And if for whatever reason there is a bad heart attack, then it is very difficult to revive the system again. As one of the people who was involved in cleaning up the banks in the years 17, 18, 19, let me tell you that I have no intention of going through that process ever again. It is like extracting teeth, a very painful thing to do. And if we had not got it done in time, if we had got the banking system of 2017 and hit the COVID shock in 2020 with that banking system, then we would have had a Sri Lanka type situation. We managed to fix our banks just about in time to be able to take that shock. So the first principle of running an economy is you have to give a lot of credence to macroeconomic stability, even sometimes if it means to give up some growth in that year, because in the long run you make it up. The second principle of this government's economic management is that we are unapologetic supply siders. Many people will say that, pump a little bit of growth, and by the way, it's linked, closely derived from the first principle. We do not believe in Keynesian pumping of demand. We believe in investing in the supply side. This is why, even when we were reviving the economy after COVID, where did we invest the money? Not in giving people some stimulus checks like US or UK or Germany. We invested it in infrastructure. And you live right next to Mumbai. I don't know Thane so well, so I can't give you examples, but you live right next to Mumbai. We have, in the last 3 years, we have invested so much amounts which you could physically go and see the amount of infrastructure that Mumbai is building. In fact, I don't know if you realize this, Mumbai is the highest concentration of cranes in the world right now. Yeah, it's not Shanghai, it's not Beijing, it's Mumbai. And of course, the extra link to the mainland has already been inaugurated. And the coastal road, one little bit has also been opened up. But when the coastal road opens up, and I believe it's only 6 to 8 months out from now, and then the metro system, 13 lines were being built together. I think 2 or 3 of them already, the cross lines have got done. But line number 3, which is the main backbone line, I think is 12 months away also, something like that. When that gets done, by the way, line number 3, by the way, on day 1, will be the most heavily used metro line in the world. And it has been designed for that. And then of course the cross lines. And of course then, in another 24 to 36 months after that, you will get your new Navi Mumbai airport. Now this is the largest expansion of infrastructure that Mumbai has seen since independence. Till this point, Mumbai was still functioning on infrastructure that the British had left us. So if you go and look at the suburban train system, it will surprise you that the train design of those bogies that we are today even using is the same that existed in 1930. So this is a real upgrade of our infrastructure, a real fundamental upgrade. And when it all comes together, you won't recognize Mumbai for, in some ways. And this is just one city. We are doing this in Delhi. We are doing this in Ayodhya. We are doing this in all over the country. Huge amounts of new infrastructure. Much neglected parts of the country like the Northeast. Huge amounts of new infrastructure is being built. And of course, as our economy grows, and you saw yesterday, we got data that direct tax collections for this year are going to be up 20% year on year. So our resources are also growing. So we are actually, this process of investment is also compounding out. It's also speeding up. Along with that, we are also seeing a return of private investments. Many of you know that after the investment boom which we had in the years in the decade of the 2000s into maybe the beginning of the 2010s, there's now for many years, 8-9 years, there was a slump in investment in private sector. That is again reversing, and you are seeing serious investment coming through from the private sector as well. And it's not just plans anymore, there actually stuff is getting built. FDI and other commitments are also growing. So the supply side of the economy is also expanding. By the way, I'm not just talking about hard infrastructure. The soft infrastructure is also important, and I'll come back to it because you in the Chartered Accountants universe are a part of our soft infrastructure as well. The third principle of managing this economy is to make sure that there is a flow through of this creation of prosperity to a wider section of society, particularly to the very poorest. And here I want to differentiate our way of thinking about it from the way maybe other people in the rest of the world may think about it. In other places they think about it inequality, they think about, how many billionaires are there, and all those kinds of things, those kinds of thinking they try to impose on us also. Our view is totally different about this. Our interest is in a principle called Antodaya. That is the Uday, i.e. the rise of the people in the last end of the bottom 20% of the population. This is not about inequality, but about absolute poverty. So if you look at the policies we are introducing, we are trying to reach out to the very poor directly, whether it's DBT or it is through various kinds of health insurance or Prime Minister's Awas Yojana or LPG, whatever it may be. This is by directly reaching out to the bottom and making sure that they get some basic amenities so that they can they have the capability of getting onto the ladder to take part in the economic growth that we are generating. I wanted to differentiate it from other ways of thinking about poverty, which is very often about relative poverty. Our thinking is very much about absolute poverty, and it leads to somewhat different ways in which we think about poverty. Now these are the three principles that I wanted to lay out, because it should be clear that our economic performance is not happening because of some haphazard way of thinking about the world. We have a consistent way of thinking about the world. You may disagree with it, but it isn't the case that we do not have an integrated philosophy which is driving much of what we are doing. Now, as I mentioned, we have to maintain this for till 2047. This requires that we should understand that this is not about one bunch of reforms that we do in the beginning and then we get growth. The growth we are enjoying today is because of last 10 years of structural reforms that we did. You participated in it. And many of these things don't get done because they are difficult. And whenever you introduce changes, it can be very disruptive. But you participated in GST introduction. Whenever we introduced it, it was going to be painful. We did it. It was disruptive. But I think on the other side, most people will agree, whatever the system is, with all its flaws, It's a radical improvement on whatever was there before. Same thing we have done with the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. For the first time, we have created a system of creative destruction in this country. If you talk about, we must have an innovative economy, risk-taking, entrepreneurship, that means also a good proportion of it is going to fail. Where will the failures go? We can't stuff them into a warehouse called DIFR, which is what we used to do before. We have to have a system of cleaning it up along the way. And with all its flaws, NCLT has changed the culture of creditor rights, the culture of creative destruction in this country. Similarly, another big reform that we did was anchoring inflation using the inflation targeting system. Big reform. Before this reform, India was a high inflation country. Not in the Argentina sense of high inflation, but we were a country where we were comfortable with 8 to 12% inflation. Today we are comfortable in the 2 to 6% range. And even in that range, we have done it for now several years. We have only been outside of it on the downside twice and on the upside once, which is pretty good record given especially the upside. We only did it at a time when the rest of the world was seeing hyperinflation. We went slightly out of it for a few quarters and came back down. So what I'm trying to say is again an important achievement. So since this current economic performance, confidence, etc. is due to these reforms, and of course I'm not even going back to the reforms all the way to 1991, we need to understand that growth is earned, which means that we have to keep doing new reforms. If we don't do reforms today, then in a few years' time, this current momentum will peter out. We will have filled out all the opportunities that those last few reforms created into the future. And there are a huge number of reforms. I am just going to lay out a few that should be done, not necessarily just over the next 5 years, so I am taking a longer perspective till 47. But over the next generation, we need to do these major reforms. One major reform that we need to do, which is not a specific reform but a class of reforms, is called process reforms. Now there is not enough discussion about this because this is about the nuts and bolts reforms, the boring reforms that you need to do. In fact, those of you who are aware of my writings will know I very often write and talk about process reforms. These are mostly boring reforms. KYC norms need to be smoothened out. Some department which has outlived its utility has to be shut down. Some process has to be tweaked. Now there are literally thousands of such little things that need to be done. Many of them don't have any political ramifications. They're just there because nobody cared for it. Very often these are things that the bureaucracy uses for rent seeking. Whatever it may be, the reason it exists. But we need to, as a society, not just the government, but as a society, we need to tighten and loosen and clean up those little process reforms. There are thousands of them in state government processes, in central government processes, laws and so on. And this government has put in a huge effort to keep cleaning these out. Outdated laws are being shut down. For the very first time, outdated departments are shut down. And I can tell you some fun stories about this, how difficult it is to shut down even departments that everybody agrees has lived past its utility. But we are doing it. So one big area is process reforms. Second big area that we want to think about is in terms of turning the rupee into a hard currency. Now do not confuse this with de-dollarization. That may or may not happen, that's the dollar's problem. Our limited purpose is to convert the Indian rupee into a hard currency like any other. There are many hard currencies in the world. See, the dollar is the world's anchor currency. It's not just a hard currency, not any other hard currency. It's the anchor currency. We are not trying to convert our rupee into a world's anchor currency. It's too difficult and not a reasonable aim. But we can aspire to be a hard currency like the yen. like the euro, like the British pound, like the Singapore dollar, and so on. These are hard currencies, are currencies in which the world holds its reserves. The other countries are willing to hold their reserves in rupee assets. That we are a currency which is a part of the IMF's SDR basket. We are a currency in which at least India-related trades get denominated in. And there are enormous advantages to be denominated and having payment systems and other things which are related to the Indian rupee. It will not happen in one shot. It will happen step by step. But I hope you can see that step by step we are opening this up. And in less than 10 years, I am hopeful that we will be a hard currency. The next big thing that we need to do is to begin to reform our administration, the bureaucracy. Now, to understand what I am talking about, first of all, be very clear, this is not about any individual bureaucrat. This is about the system. Now, we inherited this bureaucracy from the British colonial period. But we can't blame them for this. This is now 75 years since they left. And for the first half a century after the British left, people may forget, we actually gave our bureaucracy even more powers than what the British had given. So the British had created a colonial era bureaucracy that was designed for control. And during the socialist period, we actually gave it even more powers because socialism is also about even more control. So when in the 90s we began to liberalize our economy, we had a bureaucracy that was essentially designed for control and not for service delivery. So if the bureaucracy is not delivering service, don't blame it. It's designed for control. This is why our bureaucracy can run beautifully weeks of holding 1.4 billion people in a lockdown. So we can actually do a lockdown, which is a very difficult thing to do, but we can't fix potholes, which is a simple thing to do. But as I said, no point in blaming any bureaucrat. The system is designed for control. But in after 90s, we did not actually reform the bureaucracy. All we did is we reduced its powers of interfering in your lives. So it's the same bureaucracy, it just can't interfere as much as it could do in your life. So now, earlier you needed the gazetted officer to sign off on your passport application, now you don't. Earlier you needed licenses and permits, now you need fewer of them. But it is the same bureaucracy, it has not been changed. So now what we need is a serious conversation about what this bureaucracy needs to be and how to make it a service-oriented bureaucracy. And for that we need to change the very structure of bureaucracy. And I'll give you one illustration so you'll understand what I mean. Where is this service delivery, where does the rubber hit the road of our administration vis-a-vis the people? It happens either with your municipal commissioner or even more so with your district magistrate. Right? He or she is the person, district magistrate is a very important person in the life of much of India. And yet inside the bureaucracy, the district magistrate is the most junior person. It's usually a 33 to 35-year-old who has very little experience of running anything, least of all being the effective king of or queen of a district, and is there usually for only 18 months. And by the time they actually have some experience, they are back in the secretariat. So while they are supposed to be running this district, they have actually very little clout inside their own bureaucracy. If they, a district magistrate calls the secretary back in the secretariat, they don't even pick up the phone because he's a junior kid as far as the secretary sahab is concerned. So we have got the whole thing upside down. So we need to bring senior people You know, the district magistrate, the municipal commissioner has got to be among the most senior people in the government. So that is just one example of how we need to turn it upside down so that the service delivery is the issue, not control. Then there is another area that we need to do big reforms into the next couple of decades, and that is going to be our judiciary. The enforcement of contracts is a very serious issue. The delivery of justice is a very, very serious issue. And I would say in some ways, this is now the single biggest constraint to India becoming a developed country. If you asked me, you know, of all the reforms I've just mentioned, which is the one I would, if I had, you know, I was only allowed one, but I could do it really well, this is the one I would put my money. The biggest bang for the buck is here. Unfortunately, this is something that the government on its own cannot really fix. The judiciary, for a variety of reasons, is a separate branch of the Indian state. It has a certain level of independence. So the judiciary in some ways will have to reform itself. But it will only happen if there is serious public pressure to do it. Until and unless there is enormous public pressure to reform itself, you will continue to have a self-perpetuating medieval institution that, with 50 million cases stuck in the legal process, will take long summer vacations, long winter vacations, long Dussehra vacations, and will not care for it. So this is an important thing that you need to, there need to be a public debate, and I wanted to put this out because as citizens of this country, you need to begin to, there has to be a general public pressure on the judiciary to really clean its act up. I've not spoken for quite some time, and I think it would be much more fun to have an interactive session. But since I have captive audience of CAs in this room, let me say that this journey I just described, you are a very important part of this journey. I talked about the supply side of the economy and infrastructure. You are effectively the part of the soft infrastructure needed for this supply side to work. You are the feedback loop. You are the people holding people true to the rules, regulations, and other things that are needed for keeping governance on track. And as our economy grows at the pace we hope it will, the number of CAs and similar allied, company secretaries and other such allied services, we need to see the numbers of this grow exponentially. You need to be prepared for this, because once you turn up there, it will be too late, because creating a CA is a several years process, right? So you need to begin to think about this, and I can tell you this is also a huge opportunity for exporting our services to the rest of the world. One of the things that is interesting to come to India as opposed to going to the rest of the world is, India, at least in this point in history, has people who are willing to do difficult things. Some may even say boring things. If you go to the West, their kids all want to do soft things. They have made their money, or whatever the reason may be, they have become soft. So professions that are somewhat more difficult to do are effectively just being left open. And thanks to digital technology, we don't have to move to the West in order to supply this. We can actually become the corporate governance, accountancy hub of the entire world. You could be running, in fact, already large companies are doing this, but I can tell you, in not too distant future, this will be a necessity to the rest of the world. They just will not, the rest of the world just will not have enough accountants, company secretaries, and such people in these roles, or corporate lawyers, for keeping their companies going. They will just have to outsource it. So this is a huge opportunity that we have. Please grab it. but it will require for you to proactively expand your numbers by a factor of magnitude. Don't think 5%, 10%. Think, in totally different scales. So this is an important thing that I wanted to say, because this is what I think is important. With that, let me stop, and I am happy to answer questions as well.
Suyog says anything, sir, I would just like to add, rather compliment that what you mentioned regarding the giving export of services. The institute has in fact taken already the steps in this regard. We already have a committee for export of services, and we have recently launched a certificate course on outsourcing services. So we will be training the members on outsourcing services in the outsourcing activities from abroad. Just for your information.
I'm glad to hear this, because you see, as I said, difficult sectors which require you to just chip away are not things that the kids or Western countries want to do. They all want to be social media influencers. Now, I have no problem with social media influencers, and the world needs a few of them as well. But you see, the nuts and bolts of a system, whoever ends up capturing it, captures the world. In a strange sort of way, this is not soft power, it is hard power.
Yeah, so I invite some questions from our members, students at the back. We have Lily sir asking a question. Can we have the mic for Lily sir, please? Yeah, I'll just give it.
Good afternoon, sir. My simple one question is, what are the three major challenges in our road to this $5 trillion economy?
Difficult to make a list of what are the major challenges, but I will correlate it to what I said before. First thing, right in the beginning, I said that this whole game is about compounding. And so, holding this compounding process as a society, we tend to think about these things in election cycles, but you've got to stop thinking about this particular transition in election cycles, because this is a demographic shift. It is a geopolitical opportunity because of wherever we are geopolitically, the moment in history, China +1, whatever you may want to call it. There are many things that have kind of come together for us at this point and will last for a little while. But do remember that on the other side of this, when we reach 2047, we too will be aging. Do remember this. We haven't invented the elixir of eternal youth. So these 25 years, we have to cross this, and we are already into this 25 years. So this is not a time for us to be messing around. This is also a time when we cannot, for some reason, sink this boat because we are trying to unnecessarily do something that is short-termist, or wasting resources on freebies and many other things that may be very tempting to do. We have to keep our heads cool. As a society, hold our politicians to stick to this path, and we have to do the reforms, some of which I highlighted, and we have to do it, because this, as I said, is our moment in history. If we goof it up, then don't complain, because right up front we knew what we had to do. So this is the first point I want to make, is that the first constraint, danger to it, is that we lose our own head. When we get a few years of high growth, as bahut acha hai, then let's now allow the system to do whatever it wants. No, you have to hold this very strictly. Occasionally tough decisions will have to be made, and if inflation spikes up or whatever needed, and the economy has to be slowed down, we should be willing to slow it down.
If bubbles have to be pricked, then we should be willing to prick those bubbles. Otherwise, China at least managed to keep its real estate bubble going for 25 years. There's no guarantee you'll manage to do it. It can blow up much more early. So, we have to make sure there are no bubbles in the system. It's hard work, but this is the first important thing we need to do.
Yeah, now Yash, we have one question here, right?
Yeah, firstly, thanks for a very interesting session. You mentioned about rupee being hard currency down the line. Are you talking about capital account convertibility or such measures on those lines?
Over time, to some extent, yes, but let me point out to you that you don't actually have to have full capital account convertibility to be a hard currency. China still has capital controls, and the CNY has basically become a hard currency. In fact, most of the currencies we today consider hard currencies, till the 80s, even early 90s, they used to have capital controls. Even the British used to have capital controls. So, while you can't have closed capital accounts and have a hard currency, there is a fair amount of shades of grey. Some controls can be retained even in the long run. But yes, they have to, for effective day-to-day purposes, become irrelevant. And I think we are close to that already.
One from the students now.
Sanyal ji, first of all, I would like to congratulate you for your book Revolutionary, which I'm actually reading right now, which got picked up for OTT platforms. So congratulations for that, and also thank you for bringing out the stories of the revolutionaries to the rest of us. But coming to my question, I actually was wondering if there was any UPI 2.0 kind of plans that you might have, because
what 2.0?
UPI, yeah, because UPI is now currently going global, and we have actually used that to sort of boost the digital transactions. At the same time, there's also scams and etc. happening, and I know that you are actually addressing it with the tweaks that you have sort of brought in quite recently. But I was just wondering if you could probably also get the AI and AI sort of things involved into UPI, and basically to amalgamize AI with UPI and stuff like that. So that was basically my question. Thank you.
So first, in case people are wondering what he was talking about in the beginning, it's about one of my books called The Revolutionaries, which is only yesterday Amazon Prime has announced that it's converting it into a OTT series. So you should be able to watch it in about 15-16 months time. We will begin shooting in a few months time, and then so hopefully it will come out. So that's what he was referring to. But now coming to his question, I'm actually going to widen it out a little bit, not to talk about UPI 2.2, but into the digital stack, the India stack 2.0. So India is quite unique in that it has created a whole layer of public digital infrastructure, which is effectively free. And it has then allowed many innovations on top of that. So the question that he is asking, is there a next generation of these kinds of digital stack, India stack 2.0? And yes, there is a lot of thought going into this. While I'm not working specifically on the payments, I am arguing for a somewhat different area, because while we can improve the payments part, but there actually are completely new areas that we can work on. So that is what I'm applying my mind to, and I'll give you one example of something I'm advocating as being. So it's not yet agreed, and not everybody's agreed, but this could be a potential area we could turn into the next generation of India's Stack 2.0, which is to create a digital twin of the whole country in 3D. So this is, by the way, an entirely possible thing, that they can be a digital twin of the entire country in 3D. Now we already have a digital twin of the country, of the world in fact, in 2D, which is Google Maps and other such similar platforms. But just imagine the same thing in 3 dimensions, and it is updated every year or whatever the frequency you want it. Now just imagine Thane. Every house, every tree, everything, because remember this is done with drones, with a 5 centimeter accuracy. So in fact, it is also picking up the trees. And even when you update it every year, you can actually even pick up how much the tree grew. And you do this for the whole country. But most important, by the way, for infra projects this is already being done. But just imagine that this is done publicly and provided publicly. Now imagine the interesting uses that can happen from it. For example, all your property rights can be mapped onto this. Similarly, all the utilities can be mapped onto this because it's a 3D. So you can also put the underground utilities into it, the drainage into it. Imagine all the national calamities can be mapped onto it. Transportation systems, and by the way, it doesn't have to be static, it can be dynamic. So managing traffic can also be done from it. So this is just it's still a thought, but one possibility is to have a 3D digital map of the whole country produced and publicly made available. You can leave out the defense sensitive areas out. The rest of the country can be just made available. In any case, 2D is freely available as Google Maps. This will now be 3D available. So this is a possible thing that we could think of as a India Stack 2.0, as a possible new technology that we could enable. It will happen anyway privately, but we could provide it publicly, because then a lot of companies can do all kinds of interesting things based on this. And of course the government has interesting uses. For example, illegal construction. There is a public registry of what India looked like at a particular date. So if you construct something which, a year later a building exists, you can actually use artificial intelligence to just go through the whole country, and not just buildings. Forest is getting illegally encroached. You can pick up everything. You cut down a tree, the whole country you can do this. So this is just as an example, and then you can let artificial intelligence to go and scan this whole thing and pick up interesting things that you need to physically go and look at, just so that you get some example of what we could try. Yeah.
Hello sir. So over the last 10 years, our government focused more on attaining self-sufficiency or Atmanirbhar Bharat, and in order to achieve the same, the government has come up with various policies like PLI schemes or various reforms through digital infrastructure and a single window system. So, as an advisor to the Economic Council, what do you think? Where have we reached? And in which all the sector some more push needs to be given in order to attain the self-sufficiency aspect of India, as well as to reduce the burden on our exchequer. Thank you.
So one important thing that I want to clarify here is that when we say self-sufficiency, we don't mean it in the 1950s idea of import substitution. We have every intention of being a part of the rest of the world. We want to export to them, and some part of things will be imported by us. What we really mean is that we invest into things that relate to our resilience, and I will illustrate this point. We have a pharmaceutical sector that is globally competitive. In fact, we are known as the pharmacy to the world. But this pharmaceutical sector is heavily dependent on APIs, that's ingredients, that are very often, we discovered this actually during COVID, comes from one source in China. Even if it's not China, it comes from one source somewhere in the world. Can you imagine the extent to which we are dependent on these single sources? So when we are saying Atmanirbharta, what we are basically saying that, look, for things that are critical to us, we must be willing to be able to create certain basic capacities in India, so that should the global supply chains fail us for whatever reason, it could be COVID, it could be a war, it could be a tsunami, who knows, our system should not break down. So what are these things? There are certain key chemicals. We are trying to encourage that. Chips. One of the things we found was semiconductors. We can build the whole car. You remember at 21, 22 what happened? You can build the whole car, but you can't sell it because there are those two chips that was produced by one factory somewhere on the planet, and it had to shut down because of COVID outbreak. And so our entire automobile industry is held hostage to that. So first point to you is that you must understand that our understanding of Atmanirbharta is not the Nehruvian understanding of Atmanirbharta. We are not trying to close ourselves to the rest of the world. We are not afraid of the rest of the world. We want to compete with the rest of the world, but keeping one eye on the resilience aspect of things. So this is one important thing you need to understand. Now comes the issue about all these schemes that we created. I'll take the example of PLI. Now, what is the purpose of PLI scheme? The purpose of the PLI scheme is to help Indian companies or India-based companies to rapidly scale up. Now, why do we want this to happen? We want this to happen is because, as we mentioned about 4 or 5 years ago in an economic survey chapter, where we made the case that India has a midget problem. Indian companies simply do not scale up to global scale. So even if a global company wants to give us an order, very often we are not in a position to fulfill those large orders. So they don't come to us, they go to China, not because they like China, but because even if they give it to us, we wouldn't know what to do. So in that context, we needed a one-time scaling up ladder. And the PLI scheme is a one-time scaling up ladder for various sectors that we thought should do well. Now, when we created this, when we said, look, we need to have this scaling up, one of our fears was if we did it in a way that somehow was either open-ended or required a lot of upfront spending, the danger was there would be a fiscal hit, and secondly, there would be a danger that we would end up with the ambassador car problem. Right? We encourage a sector or a company or whatever, but that guy has no incentive then to upgrade and compete. They just use the extra resources to perpetuate old technologies and make some money. So the PLI scheme look at how it has been designed. First of all, it is a post facto payment system. So if you do not scale up, you don't get any money. 2, it keeps things open and you are expected to compete at the end of the process because there is an end to that process. 3rd, if for whatever reason that PLI scheme does not work in that sector, does not matter, the government did not spend any money, we will relook at it, maybe we'll create a new sector, a new PLI for it, or we will just ditch that sector and go on to another sector. What effectively we are doing is we are just providing this one-time ladder to scale up. It will work in some sectors, it will not work in other sectors. We expected that right in the beginning as well. But because we are not expending resources up front, we can do this experimentally. And after a while, we will see which sectors did well. Maybe we'll extend those, maybe we'll end those and move to other sectors. Where they have failed, we will have a look at it. Maybe we'll give up on those sectors and say, no, this one is never going to work, let's try something else. But you can see that we are also doing a sort of flexible feedback loop based policy making. And we are not married to those sectors. We are fully cognizant that it will work somewhere, it will not work in other places, and that's what happened. It's worked clearly very well in electronics and certain sectors there. It has worked to some extent in chemicals and pharmaceuticals. It has at least so far not been a great success in textiles. Maybe it will work now, but so far I wouldn't call it a great success.
What about services? PLI services?
PLI in services, we can think about it. But let me say that services is an area where actually we don't have this midget problem. We have historically been able to create TCSs and Infosys and other things. So if there is a sector where this turns up, we'll create it. As I said, we are flexible about this. And we create it, it works, great. So you only have to pay if it works. If it doesn't work, well, it didn't work.
Sir, I've been thinking about these reforms since long, and I'm glad that you brought it up in this discussion. So my question is, I've observed the working of our system. We have so much that despite losing in the inefficiencies, we are left with a lot. Okay. So my question is, can you discuss the scale of this efficiency, say on every 100 rupees generated on the revenue? How is it impacting on that 100 rupees scale right now? And when we fix this inefficiencies after 10 years, what would be the impact?
Look, it's impossible to put numbers on this because there are all kinds of interlinkages between these inefficiencies. So what led to how much, to account for it in the accounting sense, I will not be able to do. You cannot do it. But what I will say is that all these small inefficiencies in the system, if you remove, look, let's be very clear. We are a country where the per capita income was just $3,000 per capita. That's ridiculously poor. Okay, and you're dealing with the US, which is, I don't know what the latest is, something like 70 something or $1,000 per year. Yeah, now from 3,000 to 70,000 or whatever the US is, you can check it up latest. The gap is so large, even though the average Indian is clearly not that, you can take the least educated Indian, it's not like all their, average worker in the US is, 70 divided by 3 times better than us. No. Or their infrastructure gap may have been in the past was very big, it's no longer that big. So why is it that there is this big gap? So my own view is it's because we are held down by these multitude of these small inefficiencies. So as we get rid of these small inefficiencies, our system will just grow. In fact, even if we didn't do any other reform but just got rid of these small process inefficiencies, insane number of KYC requirements that you have to do. All kinds of red tape that we've imposed on ourselves. And I'm talking not just bureaucratic red tape. There are all kinds of other red tape. And by the way, in India, even today, there is a culture that every group wants to, rather than add value, wants to extract value. And every sector does it. Your sector also does it, by the way. And I'll use lawyers here as an example. 4-5 years ago, they have made mediation for commercial cases mandatory. It adds absolutely no value. That's not because mediation is a bad thing, but because if you make mediation mandatory, there is no incentive for mediators and lawyers to do anything. It's a license permit Raj for mediators. So what has happened is that we have actually even today introducing new inefficiencies into the system. And there are many things. The same thing can be said about something called the Legal Metrology Act. I don't know how many of you even know what this is. He knows. It's the laws relating to weights, measures and labels. Okay. It is, after traffic rules, the second biggest source of small time bribe taking in this country. Now, I'm not arguing that India shouldn't have laws for weights, measures and labels. It obviously needs it. Every country needs it. But the way we have set up these laws actually is set up for rent seeking. We can easily clean this up and remove one major source of inefficiency in our system. There is no political debate about it. The pushback against this purely comes from the lower bureaucracy of this country. Just like for mediation, it comes purely from a very small section of the lawyers. But in each little bit, the people in that little bit are powerful and they will stall reform there. I told you earlier in the beginning, I'll give you this story. I have been in the last 5 years involved in a project to shut down useless departments and agencies of government. And since independence, I can claim to have probably been the most successful in shutting down more such useless departments than you can imagine. So many of them have been shut down. Now I'll give you one example of such a case. So till 1991, as you know, we were a socialist country and the prices of many commodities used to be defined not by the market but by a body called the Bureau of Industrial Costs and Pricing, BICP. It was a very powerful body because it used to decide the price of cement, various grades of steel, etc. And 1 rupee up or down by DICP could make or break companies. So you can imagine it was a center of power, a lot of rent seeking, all kinds of things used to happen. Now 1991 happens, and overnight all these prices become market based, and this body called BICP suddenly becomes irrelevant. So now you would think that this body should be shut down. No. People forgot about it, and the body itself renamed itself as the Tariff Commission. Now you would think that because after becoming Tariff Commission it had something to do with setting the country's tariffs. But in fact it had nothing to do with setting tariffs, because it's actually, this body, because of its history, was based in the DPIIT, which is the Industry Ministry. Whereas tariffs in this country are set by the Commerce and Finance Ministry, between the two, maybe in consultation with the particular sector. So it's pharmaceuticals, and maybe they'll talk to the pharmaceuticals guy. In DPIIT has no role in setting tariffs in this country. And yet there was a body in DPIIT called the Tariff Commission with sanctioned strength of 120, but actually about 80 people, a secretary rank official heading it, with full gadi, bangla, etc., that whatever comes with it in Delhi. And from 1991 till 2022, it continued to exist. So I happened to stumble and discover this body during COVID. Among other things I discovered, I also discovered this body. So I wrote a note saying it should be shut down. Immediately the head of that body was a lady. Then came up with all kinds of reasons why it should not be shut down, including a list of reports that were written which had something to do with tariffs. So I said okay. So I asked for a list, and then I went to both the Commerce Secretary and the chairman of CBIDC, what is it? Central Bureau of Indirect Tax and CBI and Customs, and asked, have you ever read any of these reports? So he said no. Commerce Secretary said no. I asked Nirmala ji, she also had never read any of the reports. The question was, for 30 years they were writing suo moto reports on tariffs, and nobody had ever read them. So when I raised this issue and wrote another note, so the lady then complained about me to the cabinet secretary. So various meetings were held, but eventually in 2022 this body was shut down. So similarly, many such bodies have been shut down. All India Handicraft Board, All India Handloom Board, Children's Film Society. ऐसे बहुत bodies थे, nobody knew what they did. And by the way, I have nothing against handloom and handicraft. But the point is, there are other bodies that do this work. You don't need ever more such bodies. So slowly but steadily, a lot of them are being shut down, systematically.
Good evening, sir. My name is Vishal. So China has been spreading its wings of debt traps across, smaller economies within like Southeast Asia and South Asia through its BRI initiative, and they have been gaining prominence across the global supply chain. So do you see that as a threat, or do you perceive that as a threat to India in achieving the goal of 5 trillion economy?
See, it's been very clear that they have been using a particular strategy of giving large numbers of these excessive amounts of resources to countries and allowing, perhaps even deliberately, who knows, allowing it to be wasted on projects that cannot be paid back. And at least in the case of Sri Lanka and several other countries, it has led to a situation of indebtedness and consequently in a sense, a sort of a debt trap. Now in the short run, certainly it's a worrying thing. But I have over time personally come to the conclusion that I think this is one area where the Chinese may have become too clever by half. In the end, nobody loves their banker. So I think, as has happened in Sri Lanka, of course they hold Sri Lanka in a legal sense, and in a credit sense they hold them in their grip. But I think over time it is buying them more enemies than friends. So I think in a sense that this is a case of, a country like Pakistan may have no choice. But other countries, I think, for example, Sri Lanka, I think on the ground it has brought them a lot of ill will. And the same thing will happen to them in Africa as well. It is not buying them friends. This does not mean that we shouldn't take their strategy seriously, because they are using it to buy up or take control of ports and other infrastructure, particularly in the Indian Ocean area. But we should not completely think that that is a strategy necessarily that they will win. They may end up also tying themselves in knots. So, we'll have to pay attention to it, we will have to play this game. But let's not get under the thing that, oh my God, they are buying this, doing this, that, the other. Their strategy also has many downsides. For example, let's say they build, in fact they already have this problem. In Sudan they have built all these huge pipelines. Now there's a civil war going on there. At some point, so far nobody has blown up those pipelines. At some point somebody will threaten to do it. So then what will China do? Will it send in the troops? That is how colonization works, right? Then you send in the troops. It's an expensive, the colonial project is an expensive project. Let's see what happens, but that has its own dynamics. So, yes, China has played this game in a particular way, but their particular path also has, many pitfalls. On the other hand, we have done this with much lighter touch. For example, in the same Indian Ocean region, we have in the last 6 months, I would argue, we are the single biggest reason why the Suez Canal and the Red Sea remains open. As you know, it is along with the Malacca Strait the most important shipping lane in the world. And the only reason it is functioning right now is because of the Indian Navy. Now, without pushing anyone around, without any negative pushback from the rest of the world, the Indian Navy and Indian influence has spread to that area, and India is now acknowledged as the net security provider in the Indian Ocean. And the same thing can happen on the other side of the Malacca Straits, because as it happens to be also control the northern end of the Malacca Straits. So we have in a different way introduced geopolitical power and exerted geopolitical power, which I would argue in a more positive way than China has been able to do with all its large amount of spending that it has done. For example, it's currently spending a huge amount of money on keeping Pakistan afloat. But whatever it's spending there is peanuts compared to what the US did over the previous half a century, and it didn't buy them anything good. So, their strategy also has some downsides. So let's not think that our strategy is necessarily worse. It'll have to be maybe the last 1 or 2 questions, yeah?
Thank you, Dr. Sanyal, for a very, very invigorating session. I had one question, and I wanted to know your thoughts on that. What are your views on climate change and its impact on the growth momentum, especially, the kind of ESG, discussions and conversations that are going on? And also, what is the leadership position that India is taking on climate change?
So let me say, and I'm going to come to ESG because I have some strong views on ESG. First, climate change. Look, climate change happens naturally as well, and quite likely human beings are adding to this. So I would argue we need to watch climate change very closely, although we needn't always take the models that that NOA and other world agencies are imposing on us seriously. We have our own capabilities. By the way, in Pune there is a very good institute on climate change. We have our own capabilities managing, watching climate change, and we should manage it largely based on how we perceive this, not necessarily on how the rest of the world, because they will try to sell us technologies and solutions and other things that suit them, not necessarily. And number one. Number two, climate change, those of you who are used to dealing with complex systems modeling should remember that once you take a complex system and tip it over, it has all kinds of different and messy implications, unintended consequences will happen. Whereas the conversation which has been captured unfortunately by NGOs and other so-called experts completely misrepresents this. They will say, depending who it is, they will sell you at the same time there will be more floods and there will be more droughts. It is possible both may happen, but the fact is ex ante it's extremely difficult to predict exactly how this will be. So we have to watch what this happens, and I would argue that in this game, flexibility will beat our ability to predict exactly how this thing will turn out. So as a country we need to watch what happens and adapt quickly to whatever happens, and some of it will happen irrespective of what we do as far as greenhouse gases, etc. We are past that point in my view. Something is going to happen, and this in some parts of the country may actually work out advantageously also. So we need to watch exactly what happens and respond to what actually happens, what our observations are, and not get carried away with what global NGOs are telling us is going to happen.
We will find our own solutions.
Not just find our own solutions, we need to watch what happens. You see, in a complex world, what matters is not your prediction model. What matters is watching what actually happens and responding quickly to that happening. Too much effort is going into predicting, not enough into adapting to what is happening. So this is an important distinction I want to make, because flexibility here will beat planning. So that's one point. Whatever it is, this may mean much more than Jugaad. I personally am not a fan of Jugaad, because Jugaad means making do. Yeah. So faster response requires a different layer of thinking which I don't want to get into. But in this context, let me say, the current way the ESG is set up is not going to get us there. So let me tell you a little bit about the history of this thing called environment, social and governance norms. The history of it is that in 2006, there was a UN paper which basically came up with this idea of ESG norms. Now everybody accepted, after all, who can argue against environmental, social and governance norms? It's a good thing. But that paper did not in any way define what these ESG norms are. And then people forgot about it. So a few years later, a small number of think tanks and NGOs and consultancies in the North Atlantic began to on their own define what these are. That is also fine. Somebody has to start somewhere. But very quickly thereafter, it began to get hardwired in peculiar ways. And now what has happened is that their ESG norms have been set without any consultation with the rest of the world. And this is not some harmless theory. Things like the European Union now, is imposing ESG norms on exports to the European Union. Large financial institutions like JP Morgan, Asset Management and others use ESG norms to basically pass judgment on other countries. But nobody has actually agreed on what those norms are. Nobody has agreed on who is it who is going to pass judgment and certify, who is going to enforce. None of this has been discussed by anybody. And so net result of this is that a very small number of these North Atlantic agencies have ended up capturing the whole thing. It's a form, I'm telling you, of neo-colonial control. Suddenly some random think tank in North America or Europe will come and begin issuing you certificates. And we have to accept it and then even pay them for giving us those certificates. It's 21st century jizya. And I think this we have to resist. And since you are a community that may be asked to run these, I think we need Indian norms. We need to develop them fast. I think SEBI has tried to encourage some of this, but we need to do it anyway. But if we can create good norms, push back against these international norms, then we can actually be a part of the global debate. Because we are probably the only country in the global south that actually has the intellectual capacity of getting involved in this debate. So I have been now going around the world, just a few weeks ago I was in Stanford and made this point. They have no real answer and push back against this because frankly, it's obvious that they are randomly creating these norms and trying to control the world. If we come up and, in the end, what their argument is, that, there is nowhere in the global south that these norms, let them come up with it, we'll also include them. So they are relying entirely on us, remaining passive. If we become active and push for it, they will have no choice but to accept our norms. And we now have the economic clout to push our own norms. So please develop these norms. We will push back against their norms. And in fact, one of the services we can export to the rest of the world is this certification. Let's certify them.
Sanjeev,
you have a last question.
Hello, sir. Right now, like you said, the per capita income still remains very low. So, definitely population is one of the barriers. But how can that improve? And without that improving, how will the 5 trillion economy help the country on the ground, as a ground?
So the good news on population is that our population is almost stopped growing. None of you have more than 2 children, I'm quite certain. Is there anyone here who's got more than 2 kids? Literally the whole room, nobody has. Okay? You actually need 2.2 children per woman to actually keep the population stable. So at least a few people in this room should have had 3 kids at least, just to keep the population stable. So as a people, we are no longer producing enough babies to keep even our current population stable. The only reason population is growing now is because we are living longer. Which is the point I made earlier, that we are already into the second phase of demographic transition. In 25 years' time, our population will actually begin shrinking. Unless those who are now in their childbearing years begin to have more kids and have more than 2 kids, our population will actually begin shrinking by 2047. So, population is no longer a major constraint. We have a legacy population, of course, which we have to divide GDP by that legacy population. But the population itself is no longer growing. In fact, at some point in time, we will need to begin to have a serious conversation about beginning to ramp up population growth, because in certain parts of the country, it is already well below what can be kept stable. In fact, southern India keeps complaining in some ways about migrants. Let me tell you that large parts of southern India are producing so few children that there are states like Kerala which have not only do not have enough children, they have also so much out migration to the Gulf and so on. States like Kerala just wouldn't be able to function without in-migration from the northern states. So, but the northern states itself, the birth rates are falling very fast as well. Even in Bihar, it's falling very, very fast now. So in that situation, we will at some point in time need to have a conversation, even in India, that our population is not big enough.
So in this process of 5 trillion economy, how do you see the role of gold? Gold.
Well, my own view is that, look, why do Indians buy a lot of gold? Because historically they have not trusted their financial systems. So a trusted financial system which gives higher returns will mean that people will shift to gold. I don't think there's anything genetic about us. All this story about Indians love gold because we are somehow genetically programmed to have gold is all nonsense. The same Indian who moves to the West does not buy gold because they trust this financial systems there. So really, if we have banks that are trusted, financial markets that are trusted, our property rights and property that are trusted, people will naturally, like in the rest of the world, move on to purchasing other assets.
Thank you very much. That's all we'll be taking. Let's have a huge round of applause for Dr. Sanjeev Sanyal. I would like to take this opportunity to extend a formal vote of thanks. First of all, to Dr. Sanjeev Sanyal. Sanjeev ji, not just our members, you can see a lot of students from ICAI and VN sitting here, and I'm sure they are a lot more inspired than they were before your lecture. Thank you very much for gracing us and speaking such wonderful words and implanting such wonderful ideas amongst our students and our members as well. Thank you very much. I would like to extend the thanks to Dr. Vinay Sahasrabuddhe for also sharing his thoughts on this event. I would like to next thank C.A. Sanjeev Brahme, the Chief Coordinator of this event. Sujay Patki, the representative of Shujan Sampada, who is a co-host of this event. And last but not the least, the trustees of Vidya Prasarak Mandal, who has extended to us this wonderful auditorium and the infrastructure that goes along with it. With this, I would like to conclude this session formally. Thank you everyone for attending this, and we hope that all of us are a little bit more inspired than we were yesterday. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Namaste.
Remember